Hi friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by at Books and Jams. Today is going to be another shelf spotlight. Shelf spotlights are a series of videos that I do where I just kind of spotlight different books that are on my shelves for any number of different reasons. Today, we're going to be talking about books that have the word lost in the title. I knew I had a lot of books that have the word lost in the title, but when I pulled off books from my shelf with the word lost, I have 9 that I've already read and 9 that I haven't yet read. So I have 18 books to talk to you about today. Crazy. I have a lot of books. Clearly lost is a buzzword for me. The ones that I've read, I know a little bit more about, so I may talk about them a little bit longer than the ones that I haven't yet read. But I do have some that I have really loved. Again, if a book has stayed on my shelves, it means that I really liked it and potentially could see myself reading it again, because I tend to get rid of a lot of books after I read them. So let's just jump right in. I have 2 middle grade books that I've read. The first one is Pages & Co. The Lost Fairy Tales by Anna James. This is book 2 in her Pages & Co. series. Very fun. The focus of this book obviously is going to be fairy tales. In this series, there are people called book wanderers who have the ability to jump into books. It is, however, a little bit more dangerous to jump into a fairy tale because a fairy tale's source material is oral tradition. And so there are so many different versions of the same fairy tale. And so once you're in a fairy tale, it's possible to skip to other versions of the same tale, and it's easier to get lost. The bit of a mystery that started in book 1 is continued in here. It's a lovely book, and I really enjoyed that. I'm enjoying that series. I'm currently reading a series called The Keeper of Lost Cities. This is book 3, Everblaze. I have read book 4. I've read through book 4 already. So far, book 3 is my favorite. Really enjoying this series where we follow Sophie, who finds out very early on in book 1 that she is actually an elf. And the story goes from there. She develops a group of friends in her new world that are helping her to fight off the evil within her new world. It's a lot of fun. Such a fun series. Very high action packed with some really great character development. A book that is on my favorites of the year so far is Where the Lost Wander by Amy Harmon. I have talked about this book lots of times on my channel, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. Just know that it is kind of a fictionalized Oregon Trail story. We follow Naomi and her family as they travel west on a wagon train. And we also have John Lowry, who is bringing a set of mules out to one of the forts that they're going to go to. And Naomi and John strike up a relationship along the way. It is beautifully written. The prologue of this is probably the most brutal scene I may have ever read in my reading, but I thought overall that this book was stunning. And I absolutely love Amy Harmon. Another author that I really like is Christina McMorris, and this book is The Edge of Lost. This one takes place on Alcatraz, and one night in October, one of the guardsman's daughters, who is the youngest civilian who lives on the island, she goes missing, and a search is started to try to find her. One of the inmates who also works tending the warden's greenhouse, Tommy Capello, he's waiting anxiously. He knows what happened to this little girl, and both of their lives are depending on the outcome of this search. We also have another timeline back in Ireland that is in here as well. It was a lot more than what I expected. Let's just say that when I read this book, I really enjoyed that one. A book I read earlier this year with my patron book club was The Book of Lost Names by Kristen Harmel. Did I read this on my patron book club? I think so. This is a World War II historical fiction set in France and was so good. I just loved it. And we follow this Polish woman who escapes to France and becomes a part of the resistance. And we really learn a lot about forgery in World War II and the role that forgers played in helping Jewish people and other refugees escape the Nazi regime, and the danger that they were in as well as forgers and the people who knew what they were doing. Just that side of the resistance. We got kind of a deep dive into that, which I really appreciated. Thought that was very, very good. Another book that I read earlier this year is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. When I think of this book, I get really excited because I had this on my anticipated reads list and then it became a book of the month. So I was like, I discovered it first. Which, whatever, other people have discovered it as well. Clearly, that's why Book of the Month chose it. This is another historical fiction that also has a current day timeline. And in the current day timeline, this woman finds out that her husband has been cheating on her. She goes solo on a trip that they were going to take together to London. While there, she goes mudlarking along the Thames River and finds a vial that was an old apothecary vial. So then she begins to research where this vial came from. And then we go back in time and we learn about this female apothecary who learned everything she knew from her mother, who was also a female apothecary. And these two women helped other women where male apothecaries might not help them, but they helped them by providing them with poisons and other tinctures that would help to eliminate the men in their lives that were doing horrible things. So she was kind of, dare I say, a serial killer? I mean, helping other people to kill, but providing them what they need, assisted serial killer? I don't know. Very interesting, gorgeous cover. Really enjoyed that one. A YA book that I have read that really deals with grief, and I just love books that deal with grief, but is Letters to the Lost by Bridget Kemmerer. Bridget Kemmerer is the author of the fantasy series that starts with A Curse So Dark and Lonely, which is super popular, but I have also really enjoyed other books by her, including Letters to the Lost. In this, we follow Juliet, who is devastated by her mother's death. She's really having a hard time moving forward in life. So she begins to write letters to her mom and leaving them on her grave. But then one day someone answers the letter and she begins this kind of relationship with this person that she really doesn't even know who it is. But we do. As the reader, we know who's writing the letters and we kind of see this all unfold. It was very, very good. And finally, of the ones that I've read, I have The Lost Castle by Christy Cambrin. This is a Christian fiction with a stunning cover. So springy. In this one, we also have a dual timeline. It involves some historical fiction here. But this Ellie, it's been a long time since I read this one. Ellie is at her grandmother's bedside. Her grandmother is in the early stages of Alzheimer's. Ellie shows up expecting her grandma to be much more weak and frail and unable to speak, but the grandmother starts unfolding this tale to Ellie, which involves this lost castle that ended up being a rendezvous point for the French resistance during World War II. Ellie is super curious to learn more about her family's involvement in this and about this castle, but her time is running out as her grandmother is getting weaker and Alzheimer's is taking more and more control of her body. So we also follow that past timeline of this castle being used as a rendezvous point. So I really enjoyed this one as well. So those are the 9 that I have already read. And now I have 9 more to talk about that I don't quite know as much about. The first one is another Christian fiction, The Lost Heiress by Rosanna M. White. I have read other books by her and really enjoyed them. This is sweeping romance and mystery in the Edwardian era. We follow a woman named Brooke who someone tells her that she is possibly this missing lost heiress. And so she kind of goes on a journey to discover if that's her true place that she belongs. She doesn't quite know where she fits in. Maybe she is this lost heiress. I don't know, probably, since it's in the title. I have one middle grade in this stack, and that is The Lost Girl by Anne Ursu. This was a book given to me by Sarah or Lindsay last year in our Christmas book exchange. This one is about identical twin sisters whose lives are wrapped up in each other until 5th grade when they are put into different classrooms and they both kind of have meltdowns. They both don't know now what to do as individuals and not just as a pair. So I'm interested to read that. Contemporary middle grade. An author that I really want to read is Pam Jenoff, and this is The Lost Girls of Paris. I remember when Sarah and Lindsay read this book that they both really, really loved it, and I picked it up shortly after that, but I haven't read it yet. This is a World War II historical fiction, female secret agents. I believe someone finds a briefcase in a train station, and it has information about this secret agency of women who were spies during World War II. Sounds really good. I have The Keeper of Lost Things by Ruth Hogan. In this one, we follow Anthony Perdue, who is an elderly man who collects lost things and rescues them, he says, in honor kind of the loss of his fiancée that he experienced years before. But he is in his twilight years and he decides to leave all of his lost belongings to his assistant, Laura. And Laura is kind of recovering from her own bad divorce and is kind of sees herself as one of Anthony's lost things that he has collected. But when she moves into the lovely old Victorian mansion, her life suddenly begins to change. His final wishes set in motion a most serendipitous series of encounters as Laura sets out to realize Anthony's last wish, reuniting his cherished lost objects with their owners. So that sounds like it could be a very sweet tale. This one has two of my buzzwords in it, lost and orphan. This is by Stacey Halls, and I believe this is about a young woman who finds herself pregnant and unable to care for the child. So she brings her to a foundling home. She gives her to a foundling home and with full intention of returning. And 6 years later, she gets her life together and she does return to collect her daughter. However, she finds that shortly after she dropped her off, someone else claiming to be her collected her daughter. Now she's on the hunt. Where on earth is my daughter? So that sounds really good. This takes place in London in 1754. So there's that historical aspect as well, which should be good. I love Sarah Addison Allen very much. This is Lost Lake. I have read quite a few books by Sarah Addison Allen, and I'm really excited for another one. I don't even really need to know what it's about. She writes magical realism in the way that I love. It's light and fun, and the magical realism isn't, while it is a main part of the story, it's not, I don't know, distracting or dark. It is very light and whimsical, which whimsical is not usually a word that I like about the books that I read, but the way that Sarah Addison Allen writes magical realism is kind of whimsical and fun. Enchanting. That's such a good word. That's on here. At once atmospheric and enchanting, Lost Lake shows Sarah Addison Allen at her finest, illuminating the secret longings and the everyday magic that wait to be discovered in the unlikeliest of places. I don't even know what the story is about, but it sounds really good. Now, an author that's not on the light side, as on the little bit of a darker side, is Simone St. James. This is Lost Among the Living. Simone St. James has written two books that I loved, were The Broken Girls and The Sundown Motel, were two of her newer ones. I know she's coming out with a new one in March. It's on my list. But this is one of her older books, and it's set in England in 1921. Jo is mourning the loss of her husband, Alex, in the Great War. He was shot down over Germany, and she goes to live with his condescending aunt. But there are family secrets and things that she never really knew about her husband and about his family. The locals say the family is cursed and that a ghost in the woods has never rested. And when Jo discovers her husband's darkest secrets, she wonders if she ever really knew him. And then a familiar stranger arrives at Wych Elm House. Dun, dun, dun. I think I can handle Simone St. James' version of creepy. This might have to be my read that happens next October. I don't know if I want to read it outside of October, but that's Lost Among the Living. I have a sequel / prequel called Lost Roses by Martha Hall Kelly. This is the prequel to Lilac Girls. One of the three women in Lilac Girls, this is her mother's story or grandmother's story, a saga of desperate immigrants, a world in turmoil, and three strong women who are pushed to the limit, determined to survive. Yeah, I love women's stories throughout history, and I just feel like I'm really going to like that since I loved Lilac Girls. And finally, the last book that I own with the word lost in it, I think. I might have missed one, but 18 is plenty, right? The last one is The Lost Man by Jane Harper. 3 brothers, 1 death, no answers. Jane Harper is an Australian author, and I really have loved her books, The Dry and Force of Nature. And this is another one, takes place in the Australian outback. One of these brothers, I believe, goes missing, apparently dies, and the others are trying to figure out what happened. Yeah, I really have appreciated Jane Harper's storytelling in her other books and her setting and making you feel like you're there. And I really appreciate that about her writing. And so I feel like we're going to really feel the isolation and the loneliness of the outback in this novel. I just know it. So those are the 18 books that are on my shelves that have the word lost in the title. I would love to know if you have read any of these ones, or if you have any other books with lost in the title that are on your shelves or that you've read. I may have read others, but these are the ones that are currently on my shelves. So let's chat about all that down in the comments, or about anything else. You guys know I love talking with you down in the comments. And that is going to be it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you spending the time with me and interacting with this video in whatever way you feel comfortable. And I will be talking with you in another video very soon. Bye. you.